Most people believe bad outcomes come from bad intentions, but more often, they come from decisions that felt reasonable at the time. This is the story of one such decision. A decision made calmly, logically, and with confidence. A decision that slowly led to irreversible consequences. And no one realized it was wrong until it was too late. In the early 1970s, a well-established organization was facing a familiar problem. Costs were rising, competition was increasing, and pressure was coming from every direction. Nothing was collapsing. There was no emergency, just a growing sense that something needed to change. From the outside, the situation looked stable. Inside, however, leaders felt the weight of expectation. They were expected to act, to optimize, to modernize, and most importantly, to make the right decision. The proposal itself was simple. A small adjustment to an existing system. Not a replacement, not a risk, at least not on paper. The numbers supported it. The experts approved it. And similar decisions had worked before. There was no dramatic debate, no raised voices, no warnings that stood out. In fact, the strongest argument in favor of the decision was this. Doing nothing felt irresponsible. This is where human psychology quietly takes control. When a system has worked for a long time, people trust it. When authority figures support an idea, others rarely challenge it. And when the cost of stopping feels higher than the cost of continuing, momentum wins. This is known as normalcy bias. The belief that because things have been fine, they will continue to be fine. It doesn't feel reckless. It feels safe. So the decision was approved. Not with excitement, but with relief. At first, nothing went wrong. In fact, early signs suggested the decision had been correct. Efficiency improved. Short-term metrics looked better. The pressure eased. For the people involved, this was confirmation. They had chosen well. They had acted responsibly. They had avoided overreaction. And that belief became stronger with time. But beneath the surface, small issues began to appear. They were minor. Easy to explain away. Easy to postpone. A delay here. An unexpected cost there. Nothing that justified reversing course. After all, changing direction would mean admitting the decision wasn't perfect. And humans are deeply uncomfortable with that idea. This is commitment bias. Once we choose a path, we defend it, even when evidence begins to contradict us. Not because we are irrational, but because consistency feels like competence. As months passed, the system adapted, but not in the way intended. Each fix introduced another dependency. Each adjustment reduced flexibility. People noticed the complexity increasing, but no one could point to a single moment where things clearly went wrong. There was no dramatic failure, only accumulation. And accumulation is dangerous because it doesn't trigger alarm. At several points, individuals raised concerns, not objections, just questions. What happens if this continues? Should we pause and review? Are we relying too heavily on this approach? The responses were always calm. We've already invested too much. It's too late to reverse. There's no clear alternative. These weren't excuses. They were rational conclusions, given the information and pressure at the time. This is a sunk cost fallacy in action. Past effort begins to justify future risk, and stopping feels like failure, even when continuing is worse. So the decision remained in place, and slowly the consequences became unavoidable. By the time the full impact was visible, options were limited. Costs had risen far beyond initial estimates. Systems were too interconnected to separate. Reversal would have been more damaging than continuation. What began as a small, reasonable adjustment had become a permanent constraint. Not because anyone was careless, but because no one felt justified in stopping. Years later, analysts would examine the situation and ask the obvious question: why didn't they change course earlier? From the outside, the answer seems clear. From the inside, it never was. At no point did the decision feel wrong. And that is the most unsettling part. This wasn't a failure of intelligence, or ethics, or planning. It was a failure of human perception. We are wired to trust momentum, to respect authority, to avoid admitting uncertainty. And when those instincts align, even flawed decisions can persist for years. The lesson here is not to avoid making decisions. Indecision carries its own risks. The lesson is subtler. The most dangerous decisions are not the reckless ones, but the ones that feel reasonable, supported, and familiar. Because those are the hardest to question. By the time this decision was finally reconsidered, the damage was already done. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but permanently. And no one involved could point to a single moment when they should have stopped. Only a series of moments when stopping felt unnecessary. This is how systems fail. Quietly, gradually, humanly.